Craig Rideout murder, a family's darkest secret unveiled. Craig Rideout never imagined his life would end as a case file. Once a quiet father of 7 living in upstate New York, he became the victim of a murder so disturbing, it pierced through the routine suburban calm of Rochester and left behind a trail of acid, lies, and broken bloodlines. His killers weren't strangers. They weren't shadowy figures in the night. They were his own flesh and blood, the people he once shared a home, a history, and a heart with. In his younger years, Craig had a future. A steady job, a large family, and a wife, Laura, with whom he raised children in Penfield. Friends described him as reserved but devoted. He had a passion for computers and found solace in family structure. But what looked like a picture of stability slowly disintegrated behind closed doors. His marriage to Laura, though long-lasting on paper, had grown cold and adversarial. Divorce, when it finally came, was more like a war than a separation. When the courts awarded Craig custody of the younger children, the wounds between him and Laura deepened into bitterness. But the most corrosive damage didn't come from paperwork. It came from whispered words, from narratives passed between mother and sons, from the slow transformation of children into co-conspirators. Colin and Alexander, 2 of the older Rideout sons, increasingly aligned with Laura. Whether they believed Craig was cruel or simply adopted their mother's grudges, they began to see him not as a father, but as an enemy. And in the summer of 2016, that twisted allegiance reached its darkest point. On July 20th, Craig didn't show up for work. It wasn't like him. Alarm bells rang. By the next day, a gruesome discovery near a wooded area in Yates County sent shockwaves through the community. A burned body, disfigured beyond recognition, wrapped in tarp and soaked in acid. Dental records confirmed the horror. It was Craig. The crime scene reeked of calculation. The use of acid, the wrapping, the remote disposal, someone had tried to erase him. But murder, no matter how well plotted, always leaves clues. Investigators reviewed store surveillance from a nearby Walmart and saw something chilling. Laura and Colin Rideout purchasing gloves, acid, and cleaning supplies the day before Craig vanished. Hours after his disappearance, they were spotted again at a Pennsylvania gas station, scrubbing down a minivan and discarding items in a dumpster. Detectives searched that dumpster and found a bloody jumpsuit, rags, duct tape, and traces of Craig's DNA. But perhaps the most heartbreaking witness was one of Craig's youngest children. That child heard dragging sounds in the middle of the night, thumps echoing through the basement, and in the morning their father was simply gone. The autopsy was brutal. Strangulation, blunt force trauma, post-mortem concealment. Craig hadn't stood a chance. What stunned prosecutors wasn't just the method, but the motivation, an orchestrated plot driven by custody battles and fueled by a mother's manipulation. At trial, Laura and Colin sat stone-faced. Alexander, whose role seemed less clear, was charged as well. The jury saw surveillance footage, receipts, GPS data, a puzzle whose pieces fit all too neatly. Laura and Colin were found guilty of second-degree murder and tampering with evidence. Both were sentenced to 50 years to life. Alexander was acquitted of murder, but convicted of tampering. His role, while murky, was enough to earn prison time. The courtroom gasped when the verdicts were read, but perhaps the greater tragedy was what couldn't be seen, the implosion of a family from the inside out. How do children return from murdering their father? How does a mother rationalize leading that charge? In the aftermath, survivors are left to pick up the pieces. Siblings divided, trust obliterated, a father erased. The Rideout name now etched into the annals of true crime, not for fame, but as a haunting reminder of what can happen when family becomes a weapon. There are murders that happen in rage, in robbery, in chaos. But this was none of those. This was cold. This was deliberate. This was a killing carried out not in darkness, but in full view of love turned rancid. And in the silence that follows, we remember Craig Rideout, not for the way he died, but for the life he built, for the children he raised, for the man who didn't deserve the betrayal that ended his life. Some truths are twisted, but they still deserve to be told.